First of all, Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you all for coming. This is the first of three public forum sessions for our HOME-ARP, which is Home Investment Partnership American Rescue Plan. And this meeting tonight is for provider stakeholders, and I'm sure we have some other community people in here, but I'm just following the rules. My name is Vanessa Baker Latimer. I'm the housing coordinator for the City of Ames, and I administer all the city's community development block grant, home, cares, affordable, whatever comes across the desk. And before I get started, I'd like to introduce the staff that's here tonight that'll be helping out. We have Steve Shanker, our city manager. Kelly Diekman is the planning and housing director. We have Justin Moore, who's a planner in the office, and Deb Emery, who works with me as the housing assistant. And Susan Gents with the Ames Public Library, who is going to be recording this tonight. So if you don't want to have to take notes, it'll be up on our city YouTube channel so that you'll have some more accessibility to it. Okay. All right, so getting started tonight. Again, our agenda tonight is to just do the welcome and introductions and the purpose of the meeting, do an overview of what HOME-ARP program means, doing some HOME-ARP qualifying populations and eligible uses for the program, discussion of the needs and priorities and get some group feedback. And then I have tried to do a tentative timeline for the next steps that HUD is now requiring that we do. Okay, so the purpose of the meeting, again, is to give you an overview of the city's HOME-ARP allocation plan process and its relationship to our strategic plan, which is to serve the needs of homeless, extremely low income, and moderate income families and households by reducing the cost burden for access to housing or to maintain housing. And then to gather information from key stakeholders to aid in the development of the HOME-ARP allocation plan. What is HOME-ARP, you're asking me? Well, it is the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Congress appropriated just over $5 billion to provide affordable rental housing services and non-congregate shelter to individuals experience homelessness and other vulnerable populations. The funds were allocated by formula to jurisdictions that qualify for funding through the Home Investment Partnership Program called HOME. We became a home partnership community back in 2018, I believe. And it's from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this is a one-time round of funding that is called HOME-ARP program. So we won't be getting these funds in the future after this round of funding. The city was allocated just over $1.2 million of HOME-ARP, and that does include administrative cost. And the city must submit a HOME-ARP allocation plan by March 31st of 2023. I can tell you that HUD kind of speeded up the timeline for this. It was not on my agenda right quickly, but anyway, I can't miss out on getting these funds. So we're doing an expedited schedule than what I had anticipated. And the plan, even though it's called a HOME-ARP allocation plan, we're actually amending our CDBG 2021-22 annual action plan. That's already been closed out, but it'll open back up. I don't understand. I'm just following rules. So the requirements for the grant includes planning, community, and stakeholder consultations, and submittal of a draft plan that must be completed and approved by HUD before funds are made available. And the funds may be used to support specific populations via specific eligible activities. And all funds must be spent by September 30th of 2030. So who are the qualifying populations that HUD has laid out that qualify for this funding? And I've kind of tried to give you some definitions of the 4 categories. One is individuals experience homelessness, and that includes sheltered and unsheltered. And then homeless is defined in the 24 CFR 91.5 and generally refers to an individual and family who lacks a fixed nighttime residence. Another qualifying population is individuals at risk of homelessness, those housed but at risk of losing their housing. At risk of homelessness is defined also in 24 CFR 91.5 and generally refers to individuals or families with incomes below 30% of the area median income who lacks the resources and networks to prevent them from finding emergency shelter. Third category is persons fleeing from or attempting to flee from domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. HUD defines this population as an individual or family who is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And then the other category as defined by HUD includes individuals and households who do not qualify under any of the qualifying populations above, but are at greater risk of housing instability. And this specifically includes veterans and families that must meet one of the following criteria. For 2022, I just wanted everybody to get an idea of what our median income limits are for Ames. We're not part of Story County. We have our own income limits. And so when I talked about 30% or less, I just wanted you to know what those categories look like for Ames. So I gave you a list of 30%. And for example, for a family size of 3, gross family income cannot exceed $27,150. At 50%, there's the same $45,250 for a family of 3. 60% is $54,300 and 80% is $72,400. But specifically for HOME-ARP, it's 30% or less. But just so that you have some information about what those income limits are. And they change once a year. So these were effective June of 2022. I'm assuming we will get new income limits before June of 2023, or they'll be published at some time. HUD gives us those numbers. We don't make them up. They calculate and determine what they are for the city of Ames. Okay. Another thing is, what does HOME-ARP? What are the eligible uses? Well, you can use it for acquisition, construction, rehabilitation of affordable rental housing, transitional or permanent housing, group homes, single room occupancy, which are called SROs. You can use it for tenant-based rental assistance, which is called TBRA, and that's rental assistance, security deposit, utility deposits, and utility payments. You can use it for supportive services, which is like housing counseling, homeless prevention, childcare, job training, legal services, case management, moving costs, etc. And then acquisition and development of non-congregate shelters. Non-congregate shelters are buildings that provide private units or rooms as temporary shelter and do not require occupancy to sign a lease or an occupancy agreement. So there's 4 categories of qualifying populations, and there is 4 ways to use the funds. This is it. This is all that's required, and this is all that this program covers. So if you're thinking about something else or some other populations, HUD has been very specific about HOME-ARP being for qualifying populations and these eligible uses. Okay, so talking about a HOME-ARP process. One of the things that we have to do again is get feedback from stakeholders who actually work specifically with the populations that we talked about. And we have both community and stakeholder meetings, which is like what we're having tonight. And then we'll be having some meetings on Thursday for community in general that will talk about the same thing. But HUD specifically says we had to outreach to what we call provider stakeholders that actually work with these populations. Then we have to do the allocation plan when we have to put together some needs assessment, gap analysis, and some other recommendations. HUD gives us a lot of data that we have to utilize for that. And we also will be gathering data from our action plan and gathering data from a lot of resources that we have here in Ames, including agencies, about what the population needs are, and also from the state. This program, or redoing our annual action plan, will require a 15-day comment period, where you'll also have the opportunity to comment on the final plan before it gets submitted to HUD. It will be a public hearing and public comment process with the city council before we can submit the plan to HUD. And then the plan is again due to HUD by March 31st of 2023. Now, from what I experienced from talking to people across the country, just because you submit it doesn't mean it's going to be approved. There's a lot of revisions that may be required, so it may take several months. It's not instantaneous. So as part of the allocation plan, HUD also requires, again, we consult with continuums of care that we have here in the community, homeless service providers, victims service providers, veteran groups, public housing agencies, public agencies that address the need of qualifying populations, including mainstream benefit systems, organizations that address civil rights, fair housing, and needs of people with disabilities. And so this is who HUD considers as provider stakeholders. And so that's why specifically I made an outreach to agencies that I could see that was providing this services. Whether I hit them all, I'm not sure, but I tried to. And if there's some other agencies that provide this care that you can let me know, please send me an email at HOME-ARP@cityofames.org. So what we want to do tonight, seriously, is to break out into small groups and kind of talk about the qualifying populations. If you're a service provider in the group tonight, then I want to put you on one side of the room. If you're in different populations and you're not a service provider directly to the population, then I'm going to have you on a different side of the group. And what we want to talk about is what you think the needs are for Ames, because the funds is only for the city limits of Ames. That's our service area. We don't serve Story County. And we have to talk about, when you think about the qualifying populations and you think about the eligible activities, what do you think the needs are for Ames? Now, I want you to think outside of yourself or your organization and talk as a group, as a community. Not that you work for one, but just kind of talk about what do you think it is outside of what you see, if possible. You may not, I understand. So we're going to have a breakout area for homeless service providers, victim service providers, and veterans group. I would like you over there and over here in this corner here. And then if you're civil rights, fair housing services, or others, I want you back in the corner. And so what we're going to do is take about 20 to 30 minutes, and we're going to discuss what you think the gaps and barriers are to providing these services to this population, and then recommending some funding for them. Like, I think we should fund homelessness. I think we should fund veterans. I think we should fund it all, or, you know, whatever you might think. And then come back with your top three, because we only have $1.2 million. Okay. And I believe after admin, it's a little bit under $1 million. So it's a small part of money. I know it seems like a lot, but when you try to divvy it out, it's not a big part of money. So we have to kind of narrow down what we think the priorities are. And I can guarantee you not everybody is going to be funded at the level or funded at all. Can't guarantee any of that at this time. How hard was that? Was that fun or hard or frustrating, or now you kind of know what we're going to have to deal with a small part of money and a lot of ideas, right? So stay in your groups, stay where you are. You're just going to report out what your top three are, but you don't have to move. I do appreciate everyone discussion, because it's a big discussion for the amount of money that we have, but it's an important process. And just so you know, staff will be making recommendations as well as what we can do to make this project work. So who wants to report out first on their top three?
All right, we had three pretty easily categorized, top three. Two of them are capacity based. We had both emergency shelter capacity, meaning build in general capacity for more homelessness sheltering. Then we also had to build affordable housing, permanent affordable housing towards the 30% AMI service group target population. What do we call them?
Extremely low.
No, but what is your category? Is it population? Okay, we all know how that.
Population.
Qualifying population, sorry. And then the final one was down on supportive services, which was the backbone that's necessary to support everything beyond just building the buildings and having a place for someone to go.
Hey, we did some brainstorming, and the top one was recovery housing for people that are recovering from drugs, alcohol, substance abuse. The next one was emergency shelter. And then the third one was, again, like Kelly's group, supportive services.
So I think our top one that we came to was the development of homeless shelters. So that emergency housing, homeless shelter component. Next was was tenant-based housing. And then finally, transitional housing was the third for us.
I guess our discussion, is it on?
Mhm.
Okay. So our discussion was interesting also because we discussed a lot of housing, but supportive services came up also, and then legal services as a way to get another advocate and voice in the system who could work as an intermediary between the housing providers of the various ilk and the people needing services.
Okay, so there was some commonalities, and then there were some things that were a little different for everybody, but that's okay. That's what discussion is all about, trying to figure out what would be top needs of our community. And as we further get in detail about the definitions of these qualifying, how we help the qualifying populations, you'll get more ideas, because there is under supportive services, there's a lot of things that it includes, which includes legal and financial counseling and childcare and all of those things. So it's a bigger pot than also tenant-based rental assistance and also the development of affordable housing, regardless of whether it's temporary or transitional or permanent. So those are some good categories. Just so you know, as you talk about it and you look at these top three that we'll put together as part of the discussion that we're doing tonight and on Thursday night as well, and to try to narrow that down to the greatest need from there, and to also look at, you know, how far the money can go, because it is one-time funding. And if we fund things, we want programs to last beyond the funds. So you have to look at what that's going to look like as well. If we start this, how we're going to continue to fund it. That's one thing that we've been talking about in our HUD webinars, is to talk about the long-term funding of programs, rather than in addition to, we know we can get brick and mortar done, which is important as well. So thank you for that discussion. And again, I think maybe some of you've got a link about the survey that we're doing. We have the survey out on our website. You can also scan code it here. There's a public survey, and then there's a survey for stakeholders that will ask similar questions that you had the chance to discuss tonight. Again, a way for us to continue to collect data regarding the needs from these both populations. And the surveys were closed on January 18th. And so just want you to know that that's out there for you to go ahead. I've already started receiving some surveys. That's great. And just making sure that you know that it's out there on our website to participate in. Also, I talked about earlier what our tentative schedule is. And again, back in December, I spent most of the holidays trying to design what this process would look like and get meetings scheduled. So we'll be doing these 2 meetings this week, the 9th, which is tonight with you all. And then on Thursday, we'll have 2 more sessions. One will be from 11:30 to 1:30 PM, AM to PM, and then that evening from 6 to 8. And that, again, that's open to other than providers and stakeholders, but they're still welcome to attend if you want. And then again, just mention that the survey is open to January 18th, 2023. And then from there, we'll be starting to prepare our draft allocation plan. I do want to mention that on January 24th, we'll be taking the feedback information to City Council to recommend, where we should focus these dollars on based on our input, based on staff's input, and looking at the feasibility of getting this money done in a timely manner. I know that 2035 or 2030 looks like a long time, but it is not a long time away. And HUD has reminded us, if it's not spent, you lose it. So we do have to look at things that's going to be a timely adventure to get funded. So we will be doing that meeting with council. It's not to, it's kind of to narrow down the categories, kind of like we did now, your top 3. And then from there, I would write the plan, and then we would have our public hearing, hopefully starting a public comment period, and our public hearing would start around the 1st of March. And we're looking at the plan going to City Council for adoption around March 28th. I think that's a council meeting. And the plan is due to HUD by March 31st. So that's not a lot of time to get it done, but that's all we have to try to meet that deadline. And if the deadline is not met, we lose the funds. So, and not, so that's where we are. So, any questions? And thank you.